Carla, are we in the middle of a relationship crisis in today's society? If so, how do we get here?
I feel that people always suffer in relationships and there's always a relationship crisis. And I don't know that there's more one now than we've ever had before. I think what's happening now, and the reason maybe you're picking up on that, is because we're talking about it now more than ever before. And people are more open with their struggles than ever before. And people are learning about things that they didn't, couldn't have even begin to understand before. And now we have words to describe things that are happening. You'll see on social media people they want to talk about gaslighting and smear campaigns and all, and they're finally finding the terminology, that the labels, to describe what's happening to them. And narcissism, as I wrote about a whole book about narcissists, and this is something people want to talk about because I think maybe a few years ago people didn't have the term to describe someone who's so egocentric that they can't even care about the other person's feelings. And so what is that? That doesn't feel human. That doesn't feel like a healthy relationship. But why is that happening? They don't know why the other person is doing what they're doing. They're not understanding what's happening. And now that there's an awareness of what narcissism is, or narcissistic personality disorder is, people can make sense of what's happening to them. And so I think the relationship crisis has always been there. It takes a lot for two human beings to come together and mutually understand each other and make it work. That's difficult. But when someone in that relationship is toxic, it's impossible. And people are starting to learn what's toxic behavior and what's healthy behavior. And so now we're talking about it.
That's interesting. And I think I can definitely see that. I can definitely see that how before people were more trapped in the relationship they were in, and they were not allowed to talk about it. It was a taboo. A lot of people were afraid of being outcasted by society or by their families and friends, and things like that. And I see now how people are more vocal, maybe way too vocal, maybe sharing too much information on social media. That's like, I would have kept that to myself. Maybe my therapist
Yeah,
at most, I
yeah,
would have shared that with the world. But
yeah,
hey, you do you.
yeah.
But it's interesting because you mentioned something that you wrote about in your book, was called narcissism. And I feel with there are different words and concepts that people like to throw around, like
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
mindset, self-awareness, or narcissism, or gaslighting, and people
Mm-hmm.
procrastination. So people throw around words that we sort
Yes.
of know what they mean, but we don't truly know exactly the definition of it. And I think that people might be overutilizing without knowing
Yes.
exactly whether when it's appropriate to use it, and what exactly um or when to use it, and also who might be a narcissist. So
Yeah.
in your opinion, what is a true definition of narcissism, and who and what kind of behaviors are associated with a narcissistic person?
Okay. Well, what is narcissism? I mean, that's that's it's a loaded definition. Um, I can tell you that it's. I mean, look, it's an affliction shared by the narcissistic individual as well as the people who are around the person, who live with, love, care about, work with, are dependent on the narcissist. Um, it's characterized by um, so much egocentrism that they are unable to see beyond that and see the other person's experience. The ego, while I say egocentric, it's not just that the ego's big, it's also very fragile. And so what that means is that they can't take in any self-reflection and look at any character defects or flaws in themselves. And so it's a lot of outward projection, blaming other people because they can't tolerate not being extraordinary, special, and perfect at all times. It's not that they actually think that they are. It's that they can't handle the idea that they're not. And so often the arrogance and the belittling of other people is not so much that they want to be mean and hurt other people. I mean, maybe in some cases, but usually it's just their way to feel better themselves and increase their leverage at the expense of another person. And so this is why being in a relationship with someone who's narcissistic feels why it's abusive and why it feels unfair and why you get manipulated and why your reality gets distorted, because in order to protect their fragile ego, they're constantly shaming and blaming everyone around them without being able to look at themselves. I
Is
don't know
this
if
a
that
spectrum?
summarizes it well, but
Is it, well, perhaps, is this a spectrum? Is this because I feel that
hmm
we by nature were sort of narcissistic. Now there are degrees, I
hmm
would assume, and because we all have the ego and the
yes,
self and all of that.
yes,
Because I feel so. Here's my thing with narcissistic people, or people that claim to be in a relationship with a narcissist. It's like if somebody has boundaries, then they might claim, "Oh, that person is a narcissist because they have boundaries." Now they don't know the term boundaries; they only know the term he or she is narcissistic. So I wonder exactly to what degree, if it's a spectrum, what to what degree of
Mhm.
narcissism it becomes toxic.
Yes. In my book, Outsmarting Egomaniacs: How to Respond to Narcissists and Master Manipulators, the very first chapter um, explains a spectrum, that narcissism exists on a spectrum, and it really kind of explains the whole spectrum. And the reason I even call the book Outsmarting Egomaniacs and I didn't put narcissism in the title is because we are looking at it as a spectrum. And there are, very few people are at the end of the spectrum where they're actually a narcissist who meets the criteria for narcissistic personality disorder. Um, I start the spectrum in the healthy range of confidence, which is healthy narcissism. It's not the toxic use of the word narcissism. We all need to have some healthy doses of narcissism so that we can be confident, so that we can prioritize ourselves at times and engage in self-care, care about ourselves and care about other people and have that balance. That would be healthy narcissism. As you kind of keep going down the spectrum, you get into this egomaniac territory, which is filled with narcissistic traits. And this is where you see narcissistic behavior and you think, oh, that person's a narcissist because, they're so selfish or they're so arrogant or whatever you're seeing. And it might be that, they have narcissistic traits and they may or may not be full-blown narcissists, but you start to see that behavior, and that behavior is uncomfortable to be around. It's unsettling. It can be toxic. These are people who brag a lot or and put other people down a little bit. They're always right. They don't apologize. But an egomaniac might apologize sometimes and then do it again. Or they might be selfish in some ways, but not other ways. Do you know what I mean? It's they, they have some traits. And then as you get further down the spectrum, you have full blown narcissists who have no compassion for other people, who have no empathy, who cannot see anything from another perspective, who never do anything wrong, and it's the blame game all the time. They're either the hero or the victim. They lie. They're delusional. They cheat, steal. That's at the far the far end. But there's a whole range, and I understand what you're saying. There are people who encounter these traits or get hurt by someone who feels there's some level of malice or something that went wrong, and they're like, that's a narcissist. And that person may or may not be an actual narcissist, but what they're experiencing is narcissistic behavior and traits that feels bad to be around. Maybe they wouldn't meet the criteria to be diagnosed as a narcissist, but people can experience those traits in people and have a terrible time and have a toxic relationship. Narcissists don't change. That's why people are talking about this so much, because if you're really a narcissist, you're never going to change. It does not get better. There are people who are emotionally immature or have some toxic masculinity maybe, or right, and they do mature and they do get better and they do become less selfish. They're not narcissists. They're people who might have had some narcissistic traits early in their life. Some they might have had a bigger ego that they learned how to kind of rein in. And um, the thing is, when we're young, we're all a bit egocentric. So you really can't look at a 21-year-old and go, "Oh, that's a narcissist." Now he might be a burgeoning young adult narcissist who's going to grow up to be a horrible narcissist, maybe. But he might also just be a 21-year-old dude who's like kind of selfish and maybe bossy or controlling or this, and he starts to learn, oh, this behavior is not serving me, and I did this because in my family or my dad, whatever. And he does some work on himself and he grows, and maybe later in life he actually matures. That's not a narcissist. That's someone who's a 21-year-old little punk who grows up, like a lot of us. um, when you're a narcissist, you get worse with age, and it never gets better. A real narcissist becomes more and more narcissistic because um, remember, it's a personality disorder, and you become more and more who you are with time.
So for those who are on the very end of the spectrum, is more nature rather than nurturing, or both?
Well, I believe it's both. I talk a lot about this in the chapter one of my book too. I think almost everything is both. The way that it works is, look, you're born with genetic material that shapes your personality, right? Like, you're born with narcissistic traits or you're not. And if you're born with narcissistic traits, then your environment is going to shape your narcissism even more. So a lot of times what happens is, um, when someone with narcissistic traits in a family is the one who's enabled and spoiled, often, they come out like, these little bossy, dominant toddlers, and they're self-entitled and bratty, and the parents, instead of trying to discipline them, they get overwhelmed, and they kind of, everybody orbits around this domineering person that they're afraid of or don't want to have to deal with or have conflict with. And that person learns, like, they can control people, they can get their way. All they have to do is scream louder or do whatever they do to kind of get people to go along with their program. And when parents don't discipline children with those personalities, and instead enable them and spoil them and tell them you're special, and you don't do anything, you're a good boy no matter what you do, or try to cushion them from experiencing reality, right? Like, when a kid screws up, you're not supposed to say, oh, no, 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 you didn't do anything wrong. You're supposed to say, oh, well, yeah, you made a mistake, but it's okay, and here's how we learn, and you're going to be all right. And you help them learn to self-soothe and cope with um, their situation. You give them the tools. You don't tell them, no, 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 you don't make mistakes, you're a perfect, amazing little star. But that's how you grow a narcissist, when you don't ever have to face consequences for your behavior, when you don't ever have to experience anything uncomfortable, right? And so what happens is the self-entitlement gets worse, right? They get worse because, and listen, there are a lot of different ways that narcissism can grow. It's not just the enabling and the spoiling. They also talk about attachment theory, where having an abusive environment, a chaotic environment, can also exacerbate narcissism, right? Like, very critical parents who are always telling you, you have to be the best. Well, they learn they have to be the best, right? What happens if I'm not the best? They can't. That's where they learn to deflect shame and never feel that they're anything but the best, because the consequences were so severe. That's another way you can draw out more narcissism in someone. So there's different ways that the environment can produce, amplify narcissistic personalities. But I mean, you're starting out with that personality to begin with, and then the environment just shapes it even more.
To be honest, it's kind of sad. I mean, most of these people who are extreme narcissists, it wasn't their fault. That's how they were raised, and that was their environment they were in, and having the possibility of never being able to change. That's, I understand that that being with a person like that can deeply wound and affect somebody. It can create a lot of trauma. Every now and then, I kind of feel like empathy for those who are narcissistic, just because it's not that, oh, I'm choosing to be a narcissist. It just it's something that in many cases, and probably a lot of them have maybe an avoidant attachment. Who knows? Perhaps. But outside, if we remove relationships that at least one person was a narcissist, why do you think that a lot of relationships are not working out today?
Oh, if we take the narcissism component out and we just look at why do
Mm-hmm,
people struggle?
mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned attachment style, and that's a big part of it. It's like the pairing of attachment styles. And so, attachment theory just kind of talks about, again, back to how you were raised and how you coped with the the caregiving that you were given. And so, ideally, we want to have a secure attachment style, where we feel loved and safe. But a lot of us don't have a secure attachment styles. A lot of us have
Only
it.
apparently only 50% of the lucky ones got that type of attachment.
Okay. Yeah. And and honestly, like, I'll give my opinion. I think that sometimes certain relationships can trigger different attachment styles in you. So you could have a secure attachment style. And then, for example, I think you mentioned the avoidant attachment style. A lot of people struggle with that one because if you have an anxious attachment style, then you are constantly doubting yourself and the relationship and feeling like that person is not present, and you start to spiral when they're not present. And so that can create a real relationship struggle where the anxious person wants more attention and affirmation from the avoidant person who's not, it's not in their nature to give it. And they're just that they're not forthcoming in communication. They're not as present as the anxious person would like them to be. So you can see how that's a struggle for people. But I'm going to say something that, I mean, I don't know if a lot of people would agree with, which is that I don't believe that if you have a secure attachment style, you always have a secure attachment style. And if you have a secure attachment style and you are in a relationship with someone with an avoidant attachment style, you might start to experience a little anxiety in this relationship because normally you would trust the person. Normally you would be able to adapt to lapses in communication because you're secure and you're confident and all that. But when you start to experience a person less and less present and it starts to feel invalidating, you might slip into a more anxious style of, well, wait a minute, what's going on? And where are they? And now I'm freaking out. And you might start to now behave or interact more like someone with an anxious attachment style because the person's avoidant. Right. So I think that we start out with a style, but who we're with definitely has an impact on how we're going to interact in that relationship. And so I don't think it's necessarily that firm. And I think someone with an avoidant style is going to make the anxious person even more anxious than they would be because the avoidance is what triggers the anxiety because it perpetuates it. Like, where are they? Where are they? Why aren't they paying attention to me? Where is this going? I don't know if I trust them. Whatever comes up in the anxious mind. Right. And then the avoidant person also, I mean, this is the thing with relationship struggles. Whatever your style is, we're perpetuating it more and more in the other person. So when the anxious person is freaking out, the avoidant person is like, this is what I don't want. Too much emotion, too much talking about the relationship, too much spotlight on me. So they back away even more. And then that makes the person even more anxious. Well, they're even less present, right? And then you start to kind of continue in that infinity loop. And so it starts to self-perpetuate. And this is this is explained really well in a modality of couples therapy work called emotionally focused therapy. It was created by Sue Johnson. And she talks a lot about, she talks about the withdraw person and the pursue person, but the pursue person is exactly the anxious person, and the withdraw person is the avoidant person. She's really talking about these attachment styles and talking about the way that you interact. It just starts to go around in an infinity loop. So the more, if I'm anxious, the more I pursue, the more you're going to back away and withdraw, and it goes around and around, and then nobody's getting what they want. The avoidant person feels constantly on the attack, and the anxious person feels constantly abandoned and dismissed.
I think that I think that I agree with you when you say that people can have different sort of attachment styles depending, because I've recently done a lot of research trying to understand myself better, I guess. And I've seen myself some traits from the secure, some traits from the anxious, some traits from the avoidant, right? Maybe the avoidant is more prevalent in case that in terms that I'm more independent. I don't like to ask for help. It's hard for me to be a bit vulnerable, but once in a relationship and once I feel safe, then other attachments uh come into play. And I think it's helpful for people to understand this. But part of me sometimes feels that it can crush people because I feel like people tend to attach an identity to something. And I've seen people like, if they have ADHD, which I had for many years, people's like, I can't do X, Y, and Z because I have ADHD, or I can't be with this type of person because this is my attachment style. So to me, I feel like even though there's a lot of information out there, some good, some maybe not so much, I feel that I don't know if it's a net positive or not, or net negative overall in terms of people attaching too much their identity to a specific um, concept. I don't know if you see it that way,
Yeah, you mean just wanting to put people in boxes? Oh, he's avoidant, I can't be with him, or what, that
or
kind of
even
thing.
putting them, or even putting themselves in boxes. Like, oh, I mean, yeah, I wish I could have this type of life or this kind of relationship, but you know what? I have this, so my condition doesn't allow me to do so, or something like that.
I mean, with the exception of personality disorders, conditions don't have to limit you. You know, the mental health disorders outside of personality disorders, for the most part, um, have treatment and ways to cope, and you can overcome these struggles. Like if you have anxiety, you can work on reducing your anxiety. If you have depression, you can work on overcoming your depression. It doesn't mean it completely goes away. I mean, we have to be realistic, but it just means that those things that you want are more challenging, maybe, than for someone else. And if you really want it, you can have it. You just maybe have to do more work than someone who doesn't have the mental health issue that you're struggling with.
I mean, again, I feel that way, and that's why to me it took me a while to even research even attachment theory, because even though that I'm aware that I'm not the kind of person that will attach an identity to something, right? I just had the feeling because maybe maybe my reality shaped what by the comments I read on social media, by the posts, and see how people truly identify with, call it a mental illness, call it something else, that for them it's just what makes them them. And it's almost like you don't have to put yourself in a box. You can actually enjoy life and have good relationships, or just have, I don't know, enjoyable friendships, despite the fact that you might be an avoidant, or you might have ADHD, or you might have
Yeah, the thing is,
or you
I
might
think
be
you choose
socially
your
anxious.
I think you choose your identity, right? Like, I mean,
Mhm.
you can choose to be defined by your avoidant attachment style, or your ADHD, or your anxiety, or whatever it is. You can choose to be defined by that, or you can just acknowledge that this is a part of you, and you don't have to let it define you, and you don't have to tie your identity to it, and you can work to overcome aspects of it that are getting in the way of your life. That's what therapy is for. That's why I have a job. It's because there are plenty of
Yeah,
people choosing to overcome these struggles
yeah, good.
and improve their situation in life. So I kind of feel like if you're just going to let these things define you and limit you, then you're allowing yourself to be a victim. And that in and of itself is a problem too. It's, there's, that's, I think something also that toxic people do is they kind of like to play the victim. It's like, oh, well, it's not my fault. And, oh, poor me. And it's this other person and it's this thing. And they're just excuses for not, persevering or trying or seeing another perspective. And um, I'm not saying that you can always overcome whatever your struggle is. And, whoever can't overcome their struggle is a sissy. I'm definitely not saying that. But I'm saying there are people who try, and many people who try make progress. And if you don't try, you're not going to make progress. And then you're staying stuck in your self victimization mentality, which doesn't help you. Might make you feel good for a minute to blame someone else, but that's not really not going to help you live a better quality of life.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I hope. I mean, I really wish and hope that people truly understand that more, because I know that it's easy to fall into the trap of being defined by our obstacles, our challenges and struggles, and then it's like, well, I mean, I've heard a lot of people blaming the way that they are now to the way their parents raised them, and I know that the way that I am, a lot came from my parents, and even I've told them, hey, all of this is because of you guys, but I don't blame you guys because you came from a place of love and you did the best you could. So now it's up to me to whether I keep it or change it. But I feel that I don't know if it's entitlement from people. I don't know if it's something else. I don't know if it's just the unwillingness to do the work and to come to being very real to themselves, I guess, and to accept, hey, this thing is wrong with me and it's in my power to change it. And now that it's in my power, now that I accept it, it's go time. If I fail, then it's on me. It's not on anybody else.
Absolutely. Sometimes the struggles that you're given early in life shape you in a positive direction if you're willing to face it. Sometimes the way you come out of it can be even stronger. So, um, you know, that's why it's worth looking at yourself. That's why it's powerful to have self-awareness. And not everybody can do it. I mean, not everybody, I mean, because we said with the exception of personality disorders, I mean, people who really have narcissistic personality disorder, they can't do it. It's the blame game all the time. They're the victim every day. They're the hero or the victim, nothing else. And it is sad, but also, because we can't change them, we have to think about what we can do on our end to improve our situation. And, if this is a family member or a partner, what if it's someone you can't get away from, you just have to think about what you can do for yourself. What do you have control over? What can you change or do for yourself to make um, whatever you had to deal with or have to deal with in this person tolerable?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. One thing that I wanted to ask you, Carla, is it seems to me, again, a perception thing, um, that what I see out there, whether friends of mine, people that I know, whether they are single dating or they're in and out of relationships, and what I see on social media, again, that's not reality, but it is a glimpse of part of of what a society is experiencing, is that people are not putting the effort. So are people simply not putting the effort nowadays? If so,
Oh, it
and
sounds
why
like
this is
when you
happening?
talk about the effort, it's we're kind of talking about dating apps, sort of like where it's like, a needle
One,
in a
no,
haystack,
well,
where
maybe
we're
once,
inundated with choice. Yeah.
maybe one, oh, that could be one route that we can go. Definitely, it would be cool to explore that. But I feel that even in
Mhm.
relationships nowadays, I guess younger people in their either 20s or maybe early 30s, are not aware of the amount of effort that you need to put in a relationship to make it work, because it feels to me, again, and that's why I want to talk to somebody who constantly interacts with people in relationships, is that it seems to me that people are not willing to put the work or the effort to make a relationship work, and the first sign of a struggle, they're out.
I think that people, the willingness to put effort into a relationship is commensurate with how much you love the person. That's my opinion. And as harsh as that may sound, when you love somebody, you're willing to put up with all kinds of shit. I mean, when you're in love with someone, like it doesn't matter what they do. Okay, you work it out, you come back, right? When you're losing interest, when you're not in love with the person anymore, when you're sick of their shit, you're not willing to put up with very much at all. Like you're done. You're just no, you know. And even in early stages of dating, if you really like someone, doesn't matter what they do almost. You'll overlook it. You'll ignore big red flags, right? If you are not that interested in someone, one little thing you're like, yeah, no, because I wasn't that into him. And so, I mean, I really think that a big part of your investment level is it starts with your feelings, like how much you love the person and how much you think that this person is the one, right? If you think they're the one, doesn't matter how annoying they are, or what they just did and said they're sorry, but you want to work it out. If you don't think they're your person, you're not really willing to put up with very much, especially these days where people feel like they just have plenty of options. You open a device and you open your phone and there's, 50 single people in your, 1 mile radius. I don't really have to put up with this person, with what they're doing. I'll go find somebody else. And listen, I think that's a good thing and a bad thing. Because some people are putting up with too much, and the reason they don't leave is because they're afraid of being alone. And that is the dumbest reason to stay with someone who's not treating you well, is the fear of being alone, right? Because you have to remember, a lot of the work I do is helping people who are in abusive relationships. So for me, there's that. If someone's really not treating you well, don't stick around because you're scared. I don't know if I'm going to meet someone else, right? On the other hand, people these days they're more independent. They live longer. They just, if it's not working, it's not working. Like um, there's no reason to stay in a relationship that doesn't feel right for you. Just because you're with them. A lot of things happen to make people decide, I don't think this works for me anymore. When you're willing to do the work, it's because you love them and you're invested. That's when two people are willing to do the work. When one person's leaving, they've stopped feeling whatever you feel that keeps you invested in a romantic partner. They might care about you. They might think that you're a good person. They might think, they might care about you, but they are not invested in you as a romantic partner anymore. And that's what happens when people stop wanting to make the effort. Either they haven't fallen in love with you because you're in the beginning of dating, or you've been in a relationship, but they don't feel that way anymore. And when that changes for people, when people turn the corner, it's hard to go back. They just lose those feelings. They don't. And then what? You're not willing to do the work when you're not in love.
No, you said a lot of interesting things there. One, I think more percentage wise, I think more men are unwilling to end a relationship than women,
You're right.
because the only emotional support we have is our partner. Women have their girlfriends and then maybe their moms or their sister or somebody else. We only rely on that person. When that person leaves, or the relationship is over, then when we need the person, when we need the emotional support the most, it's not there. And that's why I guess men have 4 times more likely to commit suicide after a breakup or divorce. So I can see the positive and the sort of negative side of staying in a relationship that you don't feel that you're being treated well. Now, there's another thing that you said about people not willing to do the work or the effort based on how they feel about the other person. And I can definitely see how that could be true, and it's probably true. I guess my perspective was that in today's society where everything is very convenient, right? We have instant gratification. We can order something and then we don't have to do anything. We don't have to put any physical, even mental effort to get almost anything, right? Outside, just go to work. But then I feel that many people have this misconception, perhaps younger people have this misconception that there are no low moments in relationship. If there are low moments in relationship, that means that we're not meant to be together. That means that this should happen. So I feel that in the past, people, especially when you introduce, as you said, the dating apps, that don't get me started on that one, that I'm just completely against that. But it feels that now that when couples hit a rough patch, it's like, okay, this is not, I mean, if we truly are meant for one another, and if we truly love each other or whatever, this should be easy. This shouldn't be hard. We shouldn't be working on this. I'm out. That's the perception I have with some couples. Now I don't know if the majority or just a small minority, but I think that's where my question was coming from. And then having your perspective helped me realize, okay, maybe it also has to do with how the person is feeling about the other.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of reasons why people are willing or unwilling to work on a relationship. You know, how much they, um, what their feelings are for the other person, how much they still feel, whether or not they really want to even be in a relationship, how much they value being in a relationship. I mean, there are a lot of factors. Um, I mean, it is important to know that all relationships have problems. I think you just have to decide if the relationship problems that you have are problems that you can work on together and if you are capable of problem solving together. It almost doesn't even matter what the problems are in some ways. Sometimes there are certain things that, okay, it doesn't matter what they are. But for the most part, if two people can problem solve together and work through conflict, then you know it doesn't matter that you have conflict because you're going to always have conflict. But people, like I said, you know, at the beginning of this topic, people are willing to put in the work or stick around for someone they're in love with, and they're willing to put up with very little for someone that they either don't love anymore or never really saw themselves with in a committed way in the first place.
That takes us to a topic about communication. I think that is key for any kind of relationship you have: romantic, family, co-workers, friends, anything, right? And I feel that it's getting worse and worse. If it's hard for people to communicate to each other, it is hard to have tough conversations. In your experience, whether with patients, couples that you treat, or anything like that, what are the biggest communication problems that you see in modern relationships?
Well, probably the biggest, most common one is what we were just talking about earlier with attachment styles is that um, anxious avoidant or pursue withdraw or whichever terminology you want to use when you have one person who um, pursues communication and wants to know what's going on, and the other one more backing away and fearing or avoiding conflict. Um, that's probably the biggest problem. And most, I mean, that's the most common communication problem that I see. And typically, and not always, but most typically, it's the female is the anxious or the pursue partner, and the man is avoidant or the withdraw partner. Women like to talk. I mean, you know, they want to talk
We
about
know.
everything.
We
Yeah.
know.
And sometimes they want to do it too much. And men are like, oh my God, we're doing this again? Like, okay. And so they say as little as possible, hoping it'll end soon. And the the minimizing or the sort of like backing away from the issue actually makes the anxious person even more anxious. And then it just escalates from there. Which is why couples therapy can be helpful because it teaches the anxious person to soften their approach so that the avoidant person feels less on the attack. And then it helps the avoidant person learn to practice active listening so that the anxious person can feel heard, even if the avoidant person doesn't agree. At least they're feeling heard. So now they don't feel abandoned and dismissed and triggering all that. And I mean, the goal is really to help two people better understand each other, not, um, win an argument, right? It's about both people feeling heard. And then sometimes you have to teach the avoidant person how to express themselves and create the safe space to say the things that they want to say that they don't typically feel comfortable saying because they're afraid of uh, triggering or upsetting the anxious person. And so it's really just about creating that safe space where two people can start to mutually understand each other because the communication is safe instead of that merry-go-round cycle of just chasing communication.
The biggest reframing or the biggest mind shift I had about communication, um, discussions, fights, and all of that. And this came after I got divorced, which was kind of sad. It's like, okay, this is pointed to know it now. I wish I could have uh, known this 2 years prior, but it was like it is not you against me; it's like both against the problem. And I think when both are pretty hurt, it is just like I feel that the person I love the most is attacking me, and the other person feels the same way. And then it's just like, how is it possible that and neither person can truly understand what's happening because they are so deep into the problem that they feel that it's one against the other one when in reality it's like no, we should be working together, not against each other.
You're on the same team. That's what I always tell people in session with me, that you have to remember you're on the same team. You're not opponents. And you start to become opponents when you're just fighting to be heard instead of working at listening to each other and understanding each other before you disagree or present your perspective that is in conflict with theirs. Obviously, people are always rushing to say no, 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 that's not what happened, or no, 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 you got it wrong, or that's not what I mean, and instead just listen to what the other person's saying, and then show them you understand why they feel the way they feel, and then talk about your experience. And so sometimes it's just about slowing it down so that people can understand each other and remember that they're on the same team, they're not against each other. It's kind of like when you're on a sports team, you have to know, like, well, what's he doing on first? And, like, you know what I mean? You have to know what all the players are doing and how they're feeling and what's going on so that you can be a good, solid team. And that's what it's like with couples too. It's like, if you don't know how your partner's feeling and you just want them to know how you're feeling and you don't fully understand what it's about for them, then you can't function well together. You have to fully understand each other, not just yourself, but each other, like yourself, themself, and then the two of you together.
Yeah. No, I mean, I agree. I mean, I experienced that a lot, and to me, looking back, it's like, why wasn't I able to see it that way? And then, okay, I didn't have the tools, I didn't have the knowledge, fine. But when it comes to couples counseling, it seems to me that most couples seek counseling when it's like too late. Well, like,
Uh-huh.
actually, that's
Yeah.
sort of what happened in my marriage, and it was too late, and sadly, we couldn't save it. But is this an accurate assessment? And if so, why does this happen? I mean, what are the some preventive methods, behaviors, or practices that couple can start implementing into their life before it's like crap, it's too late, and then it's over?
Yeah, I mean, they say that the one of the factors that affects couples therapy outcome the most is the timing of going to couples therapy. So you're right. When it's been, listen, when the problems have been going on for too long, the resentment's deep and someone's already turned the corner. Like when I was talking about feelings, if it affects your feelings when it's been going on for too long, the way you feel can start to change. And then by the time you're sitting there together in couples therapy, one or both people are like, yeah, I don't even know if I want to be doing this anymore. I'm over it. I'm sick of it. Like, I don't even want to deal with this person anymore. Right. If people work on these issues early in their relationship and address it head on, then you can start to have that experience that progress sooner before all that resentment sets in. And so even if it's not perfect, if you're attacking those problems head on and you're dealing with it and it gets better, um, you're already kind of safeguarding a breakdown in some way. If you keep your head in the sand and ignore it, like a lot of people do because they just don't want to deal with it, then there's resentment just brewing and getting stronger and stronger until the point where it kind of just disintegrates your relationship. And so, you just have to face your relationship problems as soon as they come up. Don't ignore it. Don't push it away. Um, you may or may not need couples therapy, but make sure that you're facing your problems together and you're listening to each other. And if you want to play the blame game all day, you're going to end up you're not going to end up together at some point. It's not going to go well.
Yeah, so I wonder, how do you even bring that up? Because again, and I feel that it's mostly women who want um the couple to go into couples counseling, because men have this thing that they don't go to therapy and all of that. I get it. uh but even in my marriage, I was the one who brought it up, because again, I've been going to therapy since I was like 5 or 7, whatever, because ADHD. So to me, going to therapy was always me natural, normal. It's like, okay, if I'm struggling with something, I just go and find a therapist and then work on those things. But I remember telling that to my wife. It's like, I told her, hey, I have a feeling that if we don't work on some things, this is not it's not sustainable. I just had that gut feeling, and that happens 6 or 8 months before the shit hit the fan at that point. But in my mind, it was like, probably if we don't do anything in 2 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, it would be an issue. Well, little did I know that it was like 6 months after things got really serious. But I remember, and now she was more the anxious, I was more of the avoidant. But I remember seeing her face and her response, and she felt like something was wrong, that I didn't love her anymore, or that or that something was wrong with her. And to me, I don't. The only reason why I brought it up is just I had that gut feeling. It's like, hey, if we keep living the way that we are, because there were things that she was doing, and there were things that I was doing that eventually got us to an end. It was a death by 1,000 cuts rather than just one big thing. And to me, I wonder both if you're a guy trying to suggest couple counseling early on, or if you're a woman trying to suggest couples counseling early on, how can you bring it up in a way that is healthy and the other person doesn't feel like, oh shit, is there's something wrong? Because we go to therapy, definitely something's wrong, and then a lot of self-doubt starts crippling in, and more issues might come up from the fact of that suggestion to begin with.
I mean, if you're suggesting let's go to couples therapy and they're saying no, the first thing I would recommend is finding out why they wouldn't want to try couples therapy. Like, why wouldn't you want to go? First, listen to their reason why they refuse to go. You say, this is something that's important to me. I feel that we've tried to solve our relationship problems on our own and it's not working, obviously. Let's get help so that we can work through it and stay together. I'm afraid we might not stay together if we don't fix it, because it could just end up getting worse if we don't fix it, right? And if they say they don't want to go, it's really important to listen to what that fear is. Is it because you're afraid that we're going to go there and end up breaking up when someone listens to us and helps us work this out? Are you afraid of the outcome? Are you not wanting to share our private stuff in front of someone? Like, what is the reason? Because you can't really argue or stress your need to go without understanding why they don't want to go. And I mean, that's very much like oh, here's how we deal with problems once we're there, right? But it's like, listen to why they don't want to go. What is that about? Um, what is the fear in going? And without knowing what that is, then it's really hard to continue to make a case to go, because you have to really understand, like, what is it that they're resisting exactly. And then, you know, you have to know what that is first before you can, take the next step. But also, look, if the person's not willing to do anything to save the relationship, that is a point to consider too, right? It's like, at a certain point, if you've deconstructed all of their fears and anxieties about what it means to go to couples therapy, right? And they're just not wanting to do it. I mean, that is one of the issues. That's an example of an issue that you have, isn't it? That, like, hey, you're not wanting to work on a relationship, you know?
True, but then I feel, right, and based on what you were saying, it made a ton of sense. But then you said something towards the tail end, and say if the person is not willing to do anything to save the relationship, and to me it's like, well, if you need to do something to save the relationship, that means that it's almost too late. And I guess a little bit of my question and my approach is like, early on, because here's the thing, one of the biggest reasons why people say no is like, I don't think we need it, because yeah, we fight like every couple fights, but but our fights can be small, and some of them that are big, we end up fixing it or solving them, or just feeling better after a few hours, maybe a day or so. Even I have had a couple of friends that they usually talk to me, and whenever they have relationship issues, and this happened like years ago, and I told them, these were like two different couples. At some point, hey, I think that it would benefit you if you go to couples counseling, because what I've seen is like, you're not seeing her point, or she's not seeing your point, or you're not seeing his point, and vice versa. And you need a third impartial party that helps you guys navigate those. And both answers from these two different people that were in two different relationships, like, no, I don't think we need it. A few months later, even one was a year later, they broke up. And to me, it was like, okay, I could see some things early on, but for a lot of people, I don't know what kind of fear. And even them were reaching out to me just to, they were just venting. They were not trying to find help on me, but hey, to me, it's like, hey, this is what I see. I'm gonna be very honest with you, and I see what things you're doing wrong and what your partner's doing wrong. My again, that's my perception, but you need somebody else. And most people feel, we don't need it until shit, we need it. It's too late because one person is already resenting the other one.
Yeah, to me, I don't think we need it. To someone urgently expressing how bad they think they need it is not a great response, because that's all about what I think we need. So you think we need something, I don't. So I guess we're not going to get it. That's not a great response to me. So again, it goes back to, like, I mean, it's two people taking care of each other. It's two people listening to each other. If you want to go and they don't, listen to why they don't. But if they've heard why you do, and they're just saying, still not going to go, don't care. That's not a great part. I mean, that's not great, you know? Um, I mean, listen, you can't force someone to do what they don't want to do, but what you're asking for is help in fixing your relationship. So, the only reason not to go is if your relationship is so splendid every day. You have absolutely no, what would we even talk about? Then I'd say, maybe save your money. But, I mean, look, if you're having conflict and you're not resolving that conflict, and, when you say, oh, you have a fight and then it gets better, but are, is it, or are you having the same fight, just a different, in a different outfit? Because that's usually what's happening, right? You're not resolving it. So, you need two people invested in mutual understanding, two people invested in making it work, two people willing to look at themselves. You can't have one person willing to look at what the other person's doing and then also themselves, and the other person only looking at what the other person does, but never themselves. Right? You need both people doing that. And otherwise, the relationship, it's not going to thrive unless both people are willing to look at themselves. That's what therapy forces you to do. You can't just sit there. I mean, you can sit there and blame the other person in therapy and try to convince the therapist, look, I'm amazing and this is what she does or whatever. But ultimately, it's going to come around to like, well, what's your role in this? And, you have to be able to look at yourself while you're also looking at the other person. And if you can't do that, the relationship can't thrive. It's either an enduring toxic relationship or a relationship that doesn't endure, one of the two, you know? People stay in toxic relationships for a long time too, sometimes till the end.
Yeah. Sometimes I wonder if it's the way that if people would pitch it in a different way, in a better way. Because again, you're probably dealing with somebody who might not have a very high emotional regulation or even high emotional intelligence in that matter. So while you were talking and saying, well, boy, somebody doesn't want to go, it's like, okay, well, how is it phrased? Because now this is not how I did it, but then how I would have done it now that I know better. It's like, hey, by the way, I love you, I love our relationship and all of that. I think that we have a great relationship. I think that we're doing well. However, I think there's some issues that if we don't work on them through, and I think there's a misunderstanding between both of us, long term, it could put our relationship at risk. And I would just laugh at just a consultation with somebody and just share a couple of things. And what I did to my ex-wife back then
That's a
that
great way to
I
say it, by the way. That's a
yeah,
great way to
okay.
say it. Yeah. Hmm.
Appreciate it. But one thing I did say to her back then, I didn't present it like this, but one thing I said is like, hey, there are things about me, and I pointed out this and this and this that I know that you're not very happy with, right? So I'm just like, hey, this is, I know that I have issues too, and then I have issues with your behavior as well. So it's like we're both on the same box. Like, okay, it's not all you, it's
Yes.
not all me. So is looking at way how to phrase it and trying to convince a person, say, I'm not trying to set you up and then trying to make you feel, because I think that a lot of people feel that they're being set up.
That's what I mean about find out what their fear is, because if they start talking, oh, I'm afraid that they're gonna make me look bad, or you're gonna say things and the therapist is gonna judge me or whatever, then what you're saying is the right response to that fear. It's no, no, no. This is to talk about what we're both doing, how we're both contributing to this conflict. I want to work on my issues. I want to know what my issues are so that I can be better, and for you to discover what you can work on so that we can both be better for each other. I mean, you want to help the person understand that that's the goal of therapy. It's not, the therapist doesn't sit there and listen to two people and go, okay, you're right, you're wrong. That's not what we do. And people sometimes they don't know what couples therapy even is and what goes on. Um, and maybe a lot of people are worried that that's what goes on, and they're like, oh, I don't want to be called out. And so, yeah, helping them understand what that process is. I mean, look, I've had a lot of my clients say they want to bring their partner in, and he won't go to couples therapy, but maybe I could bring him in here, and he doesn't want to come, but I got him to at least agree to come with me to one of my sessions because he won't do couples therapy or whatever. So he comes in, we sit down, and we kind of do couples therapy. And halfway through, they're like, oh, this is great. I had no idea it was going to be like this. Like, can we do this next week? They're like, this is awesome. Because they're expecting something so terrifying, but actually, it's a conversation about the two people and what brought you together and like what's getting in the way. And a lot of these avoidant guys are realizing, like, oh, wait, I can bring up stuff that I haven't been wanting to bring up, but I can do it here and it's safe. And that lady's helping her listen to me bring up stuff, right? Or and they start to realize, wait, this is actually a good experience, this is actually helpful. But you're right, a lot of people are scared to go in there and feel judged and criticized for whatever they might be doing. I don't want to say whatever they're doing that's wrong, but whatever they're doing that is contributing to the conflict, or ways that they're coping that's maladaptive, that kind of thing. And they find out it's actually feels pretty good to be able to express yourself and have it be validated and have somebody help your partner hear what you need to express. Like, that actually is amazing. So, if you have a resistant partner, maybe sometimes it'll also help to help them understand what actually goes on, and that it shouldn't be scary. It should, I mean, of course, sometimes it can feel scary when you have to open up and be vulnerable, but overall, it's a nice, it should be a pretty nice experience. Of course, there are moments of conflict and tension, but the goal is for the two people to come away understanding each other better, not pointing fingers at each other. So,
Carla's been enjoying the conversation a lot, and I had some so many different other questions to ask. But as a closing question, right? What is that one belief or behavior that has positively impacted your life? Let's say in the past 12 months.
what is the one behavior that has impacted my
Belief,
life or
belief or
belief?
behavior that has possibly be. I mean, it could be about relationship. It could be about something else. It doesn't matter. Just something that in your life, like, oh, this has impacted me in a positive way in the last whatever 12 months.
One thing that belief that has impacted me in a positive way. I mean, there are lots of positive thoughts that I have all the time to keep going, um, like, if I'm feeling anxiety, I just listen to what the fear is and try to understand what it's telling me. If I feel overwhelmed, I try to think about what do I have control over and focus on that thing, not the things that I don't have control over. Um, I'm pretty much always trying to see the positive side to everything that happens because there always is one. You just have to look for it. So, I'm one of those people who believe things happen for a reason. So if one door shuts, look for what door or window opened. You know, um, I might be an eternal optimist, but when you don't know what the future holds, you may as well assume that it's going to go the right way. And then if there's something in the way, you cross that bridge when you come to it. Um, the anxious mind is always creating obstacles and catastrophizing. I do that myself. So, so the way I deal with that is to think about what's the likelihood that that would happen, and if it does happen, what might I do, and how would I deal with it, and um, and what do I have control over in this moment? So I don't know if that answers your question because literally there are thousands of little nuggets of positivity I'm sprinkling around in my head all the time to stay this sane. It depends on what day you ask me. I don't know what the best one is, but that's what you have to do is just keep telling yourself the thing that's going to work to make you feel empowered and like you can handle whatever life throws at you.
No, Carla, I mean, there are not wrong answers with that question. It's just mostly about things that is something that you either do or think
Yeah.
or engage in that has possibly impacted your life. So any answer would have been like, and yours was great because it's true. A lot of us suffer with that anxiety, with those negative thoughts, and we worry about the future and things that
Yeah.
might happen or and probably won't happen. So, yeah, I mean, I love the answer. So, Carla, it was a pleasure having you on. Great conversation. But where can people find you? Your book. Where can people follow your work? Anything.
Yeah. Well, you can find me on my website, carlalitotherapy.com. And this book that I wrote just came out last week, or just a few days ago, actually. It's called Outsmarting Egomaniacs. It's available everywhere. So you can find it on Amazon, but you can also find it at Barnes and Noble or any bookstore. And if it's not on the shelf, you just ask. They can order it and bring it in. Um, yeah, that's my website and that's my book and that's how you can find me.
Awesome. Great. Yes, I'll add even a link to the Amazon and see if anybody would want to order and understand more relationships, narcissism, and all of that, and so people can have a better understanding of where they are and what they need to do to have better relationships.
Yeah, there's a lot of that in the book. So that's great. Thank you.
Oh, once
All
again,
right.
Carly, it was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you for having me on your podcast. It was nice meeting you.